Historical notice on Arthaldus. From Gallia Christiana. Without delay, Flodortus tells us, after the death of Seulfus, Count Heribert went to Reims and called upon Bishop Abbo of Soissons and Bishop Beauvau of Chalon. Together with them, he discussed electing a leader for the Church of Reims, ensuring both the clergy and the laity aligned with his wishes. Following his advice, to prevent the bishopric from being divided among outsiders, they elected his son, Hugo, who was not yet 5 years old. After accomplishing this, they quickly went to the king to obtain his authorization. King Rodulf, upon hearing about this election, entrusted the governance and arrangement of the Reims bishopric to Heribert, to be administered fairly. Heribert also arranged for church envoys, along with Bishop Abbo, to be sent to Rome, carrying the decree of this election and seeking the Pope's approval. Pope John, with the intervention of Bishop Abbo, agreed to their request and delegated the Reims bishopric to Bishop Abbo, deciding that the duties of the episcopal ministry should be managed and completed by him. Thus, Count Heribert, having gained control of the Reims bishopric, unjustly deprived both me and others, both clergy and laity, of the benefits of church possessions, which we seemed to have been granted as a favor by previous bishops. He distributed these as he wished, to those he favored. Meanwhile, in the year 927, by Count Heribert's order, a synod of 6 bishops from the Reims diocese was convened at Trosley, despite King Rodulf's objections. Around the same time, Odalric, the Bishop of Aachen, who had left his position due to persecution by the Saracens, was welcomed into the Church of Reims by Count Heribert. He was allowed to perform only the duties of a bishop, substituting for Hugh, the count's son, who was still a child. The Abbey of St. Timothy was granted to the bishop with just 1 cleric's stipend. In the year 931, or perhaps 932, as noted in the Chronicle of Reims, a conflict arose between Counts Hugh and Heribert and King Rodulf. After 3 weeks, Rodulf captured the city of Reims with the help of 18 bishops from France and Burgundy, and appointed a monk named Arthaud, from the Monastery of St. Remigius as bishop. However, in 940, Heribert regained control of Reims and forced Arthaud to resign from the bishopric. The following year, Heribert convened a synod at Soissons, where his son Hugh was consecrated as archbishop in the Basilica of St. Remigius, with the agreement of the clergy and people, by the bishops of the province of Reims. Hugh had already been initiated into other orders, the minor ones by Abbo of Soissons, the diaconate by Guido of Auxerre, and the priesthood by Guido of Soissons. In 943, envoys of the Church of Reims returned from Rome, bringing the pallium sent to him by Pope Stephen. In 943, he held the office of the Chief Chancellor of France. By 945, he relinquished the rights and title of Abbot of Remigius. In 946, Reims was besieged by 3 kings, Louis IV of France, Otto of Germany, and Conrad of Transjorane Burgundy. Hugh, realizing he couldn't match such a large army, consulted with his relatives Arnulf of Flanders and Guido about what to do in this crisis. It had been agreed that his eyes would be gouged out if the city was taken by force. To protect himself, he left the city with his followers on the 3rd day of the siege. The kings then entered the city and, alongside the bishops, had Arthaud reinstated as bishop through Robert, the Archbishop of Trier, and Frederick of Mainz. The following year, King Louis laid siege to the castle of Mouzon, which Hugh, after being expelled from Reims, had kept for himself. However, not achieving his goals, and with the Lotharingians withdrawing after several weeks, he went back to Reims. Shortly after, around the Easter festival, some suggested to Prince Hugh that Duracortorum could be easily taken. He gathered an army, as if to capture it immediately, and attacked the city with Bishop Hugh. But with the king's and Arthaud's soldiers bravely resisting, he withdrew, thwarted, on the 8th day after his arrival. Meanwhile, Kings Louis and Otto negotiated to resolve the dispute over the Archbishopric of Reims. A meeting was called on the River Char, and bishops from both sides attended, but since it wasn't a synod, the issue couldn't be settled. Therefore, in mid-November, a synod was announced, and with the archbishopric temporarily assigned to Arthaud, Hugh was allowed to stay at Mouzon. However, seeking revenge for his defeat, he joined with Theobald of Montagu, his brother-in-law, and devastated villages near Duracortorum during harvest time. The synod was held in Verdun, presided over by Robert, Bishop of Trier, along with Arthaud of Reims, Odalric of Aachen, Adalbero of Metz, Gosselin of Toul, Hildebald of Transylvania, Israel the Breton, and also attended by Bruno the abbot, King Otto's brother, as well as Agenold and Odilon, other abbots. Hugh was officially summoned, but since he refused to attend, the Bishopric of Reims was awarded to Arthaud. Yet, because the matter was complex and didn't seem easily resolved by the provincial bishops, it was decided to convene a full council the following year in the Church of St. Peter near Mouzon, drawing from the dioceses of Trier and Reims. When Bishop Hugh arrived and spoke with Robert, Archbishop of Trier, who presided over the council by special legation, he refused to enter the synod. Pope Agappatus sent letters to the bishops through his cleric, who had brought them from Rome. The letters didn't carry any canonical authority, but simply instructed that the bishopric be returned to Hugh of Reims. After reading them, the bishops responded that it wasn't appropriate to disregard the mandate of the apostolic legation, which had been accepted by Archbishop Robert in front of the kings and bishops. This was because the letters were presented by an enemy and rival of Bishop Arthaud. Thus, after reading chapter 19 of the Council of Carthage, on the accused and the accuser, it was decided that while Arthaud retained the parish of Reims, Hugh, who had already been called to 2 synods and had refused to come, should refrain from communion and governance of the Reims bishopric until he presented himself to a universal synod to clear his name. The decision was immediately written down and sent to Hugh, who the next day, January 14th, sent the same document back to Bishop Robert, adding that he would never comply with their judgment. As for Arthaud, it is said that he was the brother of a certain Dodo. After becoming the Archbishop of Reims from a monk of Reims, he received the pallium a year after his ordination. This was sent to him by the legates of the Church of Reims from Pope John, son of Maria, also known as Marozia, or from Alberic, the patrician and brother of the Pope. In 933, he presided over a council at Château Thierry with Bishop Tutulon of Tours. That same year, he consecrated Hildegarius of Beauvais and Fulbert of Cambrai as bishops. In 935, he held a council at Saint-Macaire and ordained monk Wilfrid as Bishop of Terrouan. In 936, he anointed King Louis from overseas in the city of Laon. In 939, he excommunicated Heribert, who was occupying certain towns and villages belonging to the Church of Reims. In 940, Louis from overseas granted him and his church the perpetual right to possess the coinage of the city of Reims. In that same year, after being forced out of his position, he received the abbey of Saint Ball and the monastery of Avignon. In 948, following the Council of Mouzon, Pope Agappatus, having received his letters of restitution, sent his vicar, Bishop Marinus, to King Otto to convene a general synod. The synod was gathered that year, on the 7th day before the Ides of June, at the palace of Ingelheim. There, Arthaud's letters were read before the kings and bishops. After the reading and translation of these letters for the kings into the Germanic language, a man named Sigbald entered, bringing letters from the cleric Hugh. He had brought these from Rome and had already presented them at another synod in Mouzon, claiming they were given to him in Rome by Marinus, who was present as a vicar. Lord Marinus, presenting the letters that Sigbald had brought from Rome, ordered them to be read before the synod. During the reading, it was found, as the letters themselves reported, that Bishop Wido of Soissons, Hildegarius of Beauvais, Rodulf of Laon, and all other bishops of the Reims diocese, had sent the same letters to the Apostolic See for the restoration of Hugh to the seat of Reims, and the expulsion of Arthaud. After these readings, Bishop Arthaud, Rodulf, who was mentioned in the letters, and Fulbert, Bishop of Cambrai, rejected the letters. They claimed they had never seen or heard of them before and had not agreed to their content. When the same cleric couldn't contest this, despite interrupting with accusations, Lord Marinus suggested to the whole synod that they provide advice and a fair judgment on such an accuser and the accuser of the bishop. Once the accuser was publicly exposed for making false claims, and chapters regarding such accusers were read, they unanimously decided he should be stripped of his honor and exiled according to the chapter's terms. Thus, deprived of his diaconate ministry, he was rejected from the synod's presence and left. However, for Bishop Arthaud, who had attended all synods without evading judgment, they decided, praised, and confirmed, that the Bishopric of Reims should be fully retained and managed according to the laws of the canons and the decrees of the Holy Fathers. On the second day of the session, after readings of divine authority and a speech by Marinus's vicar, Lord Robert, Archbishop of Trier, suggested that since the Bishopric of Reims had been restored and reinstated to Bishop Arthaud according to the sacred law, synodal judgment should be conducted on the invader of the seat. Marinus's vicar then instructed the synod to issue a canonical sentence on this presumption. Therefore, the chapters of the Holy Law were brought forth. After they were read, in accordance with the laws of the sacred canons and the decrees of the Holy Fathers Sixtus, Alexander, Innocent, Zosimus, Boniface, Celestine, Leo, Symmachus and other holy teachers of the Church of God, they excommunicated and expelled Hugo, the usurper of the Church of Reims, from the Church of God until he sought repentance and worthy satisfaction. In that same year, Arthaldus attended the council in Trier and became the godfather to Louis, the son of Louis from across the sea, which means he baptized him. This marks the end of Flodoir's history. Around the year 950, the same bishop moved the body of Saint Bertha, the abbess, to Avenay. Documents from this year, as well as from 938, 950, and 953, confirm that Arthaldus was the chief chancellor of the kingdom at that time. In 952, he returned an abbey named Cosla, located in the Vosges, to the monks of Saint Remigius. In the same year, he replaced the secular clergy with monks at Saint Basilis, and reportedly gave the abbey of Saint Timothy to the same monks of Saint Remigius, which had previously belonged to the archbishops of Reims. However, this concession is more accurately attributed to Adalbero. For more details, see the Bollandus, August edition, Volume 4, page 576. In 953, he convened a synod of 5 bishops at St. Theodoric in the region of Reims. Then in 954, on November 12, he consecrated Lothar, the king of the Franks, in the Basilica of St. Remigius. By 958, he had recaptured the fortress of Coudray, which had been seized from his church by Theobald, Count of Chartres. Finally, in 961, on September 30, he succumbed to illness and passed away, and he was buried at the feet of Saint Remigius. Afterwards, with the efforts of Count Hugh and some of Herbert's other children and certain bishops to have the vacant see of Reims returned to Hugh, Queen Gerberga and her brother Bruno objected, even though King Lothar supported Hugh's restoration. The issue was discussed at a synod in Macon in the Diocese of Meaux in 962, but no decision was made on Hugh's case without consulting the Supreme Pontiff, especially since Rorik of Laon and Gibenus of Chalon, having been excommunicated by several bishops, could not be reinstated into ecclesiastical communion. After receiving a response from Rome, Hugh was rejected, and another bishop was ordained. For more information on Arthaldus' writings, see the Literary History of France, Volume 6, page 297. Letter to the Synod assembled at Ingelheim. By Arthaud, Archbishop of Reims.
To the Vicar of the Holy Roman and Apostolic See, Lord Marino, and to the entire Holy Synod gathered at Ingelheim, I, Arthaldus, by the grace of divine mercy, Archbishop of Reims, send greetings. Lord Pope Agapitius has sent letters to us and the other bishops of our diocese, instructing us to attend this council of your holiness, fully prepared, so that we can clarify the troubles our see is experiencing to your holiness. Therefore, I have decided to explain to you how the dispute between me and Hugo began and is still ongoing. After Archbishop Herodias passed away, we elected Seulf, who was then the archdeacon of our city, to the office of bishop of the same see. Once ordained as bishop, he, with zeal against the relatives of his predecessor, found himself unable to remove them from their positions on his own. He then sought the friendship of Count Heribert, advised by certain laymen, namely his counselors, and secured it by making an oath through these same counselors. This was under the condition that after his death, the Church's soldiers would not elect a bishop without Heribert's counsel. In return, the Count was to separate the brother and nephews of Bishop Herodias from any involvement in the affairs of the Reims bishopric. After these actions, Bishop Herodias's relatives were accused by Bishop Seulf's counselors of disloyalty to their lord. Count Heribert was summoned with many of his men and was ordered to bring them to account, because they refused to engage in single combat against their accusers. They were deprived of the possessions they held from the bishopric, captured, and taken by Count Heribert to King Robert, by whom they were also held in custody until King Robert's death. In the 3rd year of his tenure, Bishop Seulf, as many claim, was poisoned by Heribert's associates and died. Soon after, Count Heribert went to the city of Reims and gathered the Church's soldiers and some clergy members to discuss electing a new leader, as had been agreed upon. Together, They traveled to King Ralph in Burgundy to request authority for Heribert to manage the bishopric. The condition was that he would respect and uphold the rights of both the clergy and the laity and govern justly, without wrongdoing, until he could present a suitable clergyman to the king for ordination into the episcopal ministry. Upon returning to the city, the count distributed the bishopric's properties among his supporters as he saw fit, taking them from others. Without any legal process, he stripped some of their possessions or expelled them from the city. He then invited Ulrich, the bishop of Aix, to the city to perform episcopal duties. For over 6 years, he controlled the bishopric, managing it according to his own desires, and he and his wife lived in the bishop's residence. However, in the 7th year, due to disputes with King Ralph and Count Hugh, King Ralph, along with Hugh, his brother Boso, and many others, both bishops and counts, laid siege to Reims. The bishops were upset with him, complaining that the city had been without a pastor for too long, violating divine law. Moved by their grievances, the king encouraged the clergy and the people to elect a pastor, allowing them to do so for the honor of God and their loyalty to him. Thus, with the agreement of all the clergy and laity outside the siege, and even many inside, a humble person of our choosing was elected, more as a burden than an honor. Finally, when both the soldiers and citizens opened the city gates to King Rodulf, and the 18 bishops gave me their episcopal blessing, my humility was acknowledged by the entire clergy and other citizens. I was enthroned by the bishops of our diocese. As God allowed, I served for nearly 9 years, ordaining 8 bishops throughout the diocese and many clerics in the episcopal office as needed. In the 9th year after I had blessed King Louis, with support from Hugh, the kingdom's princes, and Queen Gerberga, and anointed them with holy chrism, Count Hugh, angry that I refused to join in the king's betrayal, besieged the city of Reims with Count Heribert and William, the Norman leader. Not long after, on the 6th day of the siege, I was abandoned by nearly all the lay soldiers. Left alone, I was compelled to go to Hugh and Heribert. Under their pressure and intimidation, I was forced to resign from my episcopal duties, and they sent me to live in the monastery of St. Basilis. Meanwhile, they introduced Hugh, Heribert's son, who had been ordained a deacon at Auxerre, into the city and took control. However, King Louis, returning from Burgundy, found me at St. Basilis and took me along with my relatives, whose possessions Count Heribert had seized, to Laon, which Heribert and Hugh were besieging at the time. After lifting the siege, he entered the town and arranged for our stay. In the meantime, some clerics from our area, as well as certain lay people, were harshly treated by Heribert. Some clerics were imprisoned, and their possessions were seized and plundered, with looting spreading widely throughout the city. Meanwhile, the bishops of our diocese were summoned by Hugh and Heribert, who were eager to inquire about the ordination of Herbert's son, Hugh. The people of Soissons gathered and sent Bishop Hildegarius of Laon to me, along with other envoys, requesting that I join them to discuss the corruption of this ordination. I replied that it wasn't appropriate for me to go to them, as my adversaries and enemies were among them. I suggested that if they wished to speak with me, they should come to a location where I could meet them safely. When they arrived at the designated place, I went to meet them upon arrival. I bowed before them, pleading that for the love and honor of God, they strive to give advice that was suitable for both them and me. They began urging me about the ordination of the aforementioned Hugh and tried in every way to persuade me to agree, promising to secure certain matters of the bishopric for me. After delaying my response for a long time and seeing their persistence, I stood up and openly forbade them in front of everyone, excommunicating them by the authority of God the Father Almighty, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. I declared that none of them should proceed with this ordination, nor should anyone lay hands on episcopal honor while I was alive, nor should anyone presume to receive the same blessing. If it were to happen, I would appeal to the Apostolic See. With them raging as a result, I softened my response so I could leave their midst and return to Laon. I suggested they send someone with me to report what advice I might find on this matter with my Lady Queen and her loyal followers, since the king was absent. To this, they sent Bishop Darrald, thinking I would change my mind. When he arrived and questioned me in front of the Lady Queen and her followers, I rose again and proclaimed the same excommunication against those bishops. I made sure to renew the appeal to the Apostolic See, excommunicating Darrald himself, so that he would not keep it secret but declare it openly to all. After these events unfolded, they dismissed our excommunication, traveled to Reims, and while some took part in the ordination, others chose to withdraw. As I stayed with the king, I shared in the hardships he endured. When Hugo and Heribert attacked him in battle, I was by his side and narrowly escaped death. By God's help and protection, I managed to slip away and wandered as a fugitive through remote areas and forests, not daring to settle in one place. However, Counts Hugo and Heribert convinced some of our friends, under their influence, to to search for me and bring me to them, promising rewards and enrichment. My friends found me wandering in various places and brought me to these counts. Once they had me in their power, they demanded I hand over the pallium given to me by the Roman See and completely renounce my priestly duties. I declared that I would never do such a thing, not even for the sake of my life. Under their pressure, I was ultimately forced to renounce my bishopric. So, I was taken back to St. Basilis, as if without a position, to live. I stayed there for a few days in the monastery, until I received word from messengers of Count Heribert's household that he was plotting against me. Terrified by these messages, I left and hid in the forests. In the quiet hours and along a remote path, I returned to Laon, where the king received me and allowed me to stay with him. I remained there with him and his loyal followers, waiting and praying for God's mercy, until he inspired Lord King Arthaud to come to the aid of our king and us in France. After Our Lady Queen left Laon to seek the king's absolution, I traveled with my elder to King Arthaud, and we also went to Reims. At that time, the city was surrounded by armies, and the bishops present decided I should be reinstated. Consequently, King Arthaud ordered Hugh to leave and abandon the city he had taken. After some hesitation and realizing he couldn't resist or rely on his friends for support, Hugh decided to leave, asking for safe passage for himself and his people. He was allowed to leave safely with everyone who chose to follow him, taking whatever he wanted without objection. Thus, when I entered the city with the kings, I was ordered to be restored to my position and honor. Welcomed by the Lord Archbishops, Robert of Trier and Frederick of Mainz, along with others, and congratulated by both the church clergy and other citizens, I was reinstated to the episcopal seat by them. Meanwhile, Hugh left Reims and occupied the castle of Mouzon with his people, fortifying it against the loyalists of our elder king. A meeting was held between my elder king and Lord Otto on the River Char, attended by both Hugh and me, along with his supporters. There, the bishops heard the dispute, and Hugh presented letters to the Roman seat, supposedly written in my name, asking for my resignation from my episcopal duties, which I have always denied dictating or confirming. Since a synod had not been convened at that time, our dispute couldn't be resolved, as Hugh's supporters pointed out. A synod was announced to be held in Verdun around mid-November, with the bishops on both sides consenting. In the meantime, it was decided that I would govern the seat of Reims while Hugh remained in Mouzon. Not long after, during the grape harvest, our rival Hugh, along with Theobald, an enemy of the king and our kingdom, and several other wrongdoers, came to the villages near the city that belonged to the Bishop of Reims. They gathered almost all the wine from these areas and transported it to different regions. During this time, many wrongs were committed there. People from our church were taken captive and subjected to various tortures for ransom. A synod was announced and held in Verdun, presided over by Robert, the Bishop of Trier, by command of the Lord Pope in Rome, with Lord Bruno and several bishops and abbots present. Hugh, as mentioned, was summoned to this synod, and although 2 bishops, Adalbero and Goslin, were sent to bring him, he refused to come. The entire synod decided that I should govern the Bishopric of Reims. Another synod was scheduled for the Ides of January, and it was indeed convened as announced in the Church of St. Peter, overlooking the castle of Mouzon, by Lord Robert, along with others gathered there. We acknowledge that through your efforts, a monastery of monks in honor of Mary, the Mother of God, was established in the castle of Mouzon, which is on the Meuse River. It was adorned with religious observance and endowed with your properties, as well as the lands and churches of your church. We received this under the decree of Blessed Peter, the chief of the apostles, and ours, at your request. Furthermore, the small estate named Tin, established by the distinguished man Stephen and his wife Fredwid, and dedicated to Saint Remigius, which you granted to the monastery in Mouzon because it could not stand alone due to lack of resources, was transferred, with compensations made to Blessed Remigius, with the consent of the brothers. We want the entire church to know that we are in full agreement. We confirm with this decree that whatever is given or will be given by you, or by anyone else, whether it's cultivated or uncultivated land, vineyards, meadows, churches, male and female slaves, waters, or watercourses, and everything related to the aforementioned monastery, is under the authority of St. Peter, the chief of the apostles, and ours. This is to ensure that the place remains peaceful and inviolable, free from the resentment of detractors. If anyone, which we do not expect, recklessly dares to go against what has been piously and firmly arranged by our authority through this privilege, or tries to break and transgress in any way what we have established for the praise of God, and the stability of the already mentioned monastery, let them know they are bound by the authority of St. Peter, whose duties we fulfill, even though we are unworthy, and they shall be burned with eternal fire along with the devil and Judas, the betrayer of our Lord Jesus Christ. However, whoever, with pious intent, remains an observer in all things, keeping the command of our apostolic constitution with a focus on the worship of God, will receive the grace of blessing and forgiveness of their sins and become a participant in eternal life. This was written by the hand of Stephen, a notary of the Holy Roman Church, in April. It was given by the hand of Bishop Andrew, on the 23rd of April, in the 7th year of the pontificate of our most holy Lord and 13th Pope, in the 11th year of the reign of Lord Otto the Great as Emperor, and the 5th of the Younger, in the month of April, in the 15th indiction.